Renowned veteran South African photographer and anti-apartheid activist Dr. Peter Magubane has died at the age of 91. His family says he died peacefully at his home on Monday. The struggle stalwart became Nelson Mandela's official photographer following his release from prison in the early 1990s and also captured the 1976 Soweto uprising. One of his most iconic images from 1956 captured a young white girl sitting on a bench marked Europeans only, her black maid sitting behind her on the other side of the bench. His daughter, Fikile Magubane, says her father was unwell before his passing. Magubane would have been 92 on the 18th of January. Now, joining us in the studio to discuss this is Khona Dlamini, Programs Manager, Market Photoworkshop, School of Photography. Thank you so much, Khona, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. We're talking about Peter Magubane's sad passing, and we've realized that Peter was an icon in South Africa. Can you provide some background into the passing of Peter Magubane and his contributions, especially as an apartheid-era photographer?
Thank you. I mean, his passing is really a sad moment. He has contributed immensely. If you understand how things worked during apartheid, Black people could not officially work as photographers. Dr. Magubane was one of the few who braved it, and essentially, for much of his career, he was imprisoned. He was detained, he was shot at. There was a story that he used to love telling about how the only way he was able to go and get the sort of images he was able to get, especially around the really turbulent years, was to hide his camera in a loaf. Sometimes he would hide it in a carton of milk and still photograph, because the moment he was seen with the camera, he would become a target. I mean, he was already targeted as a photojournalist. For the type of images that he took.
And what are some of these iconic images that come to mind when Peter is mentioned?
I think some of my favorite images would be from the Rivonia trial, which was in 1964. So photographs of Nelson Mandela, Winnie Mandela, Moses Kotane, the other trialists. From when Dr. Magubane was actually quite young, but he covered the Rivonia trial. And that is interesting for me because when you look at those images, particularly at that time, they were very well curated. The Mandelas were very clear on the type of visual message that they wanted to send to the world. And Dr. Magubane was there to actually photograph all of that, to document that for posterity.
Right. Now, in what ways would you say that activism through photography contributed to the anti-apartheid movement?
I think, interestingly, and this is true for just about all the photojournalists that operated at that time, by virtue of being photojournalists and wanting to depict the realities of the majority of people in this country, that made them targets. It made them unwitting activists, but what they were really doing is really doing media work, showing the country as it was, the realities as it was, outside of the apartheid state apparatus, and it's wanting to show South Africa as if the situation for the oppressed majority was the norm and it was okay and most people were okay with it. So I think for me, what I take away from that is that that determination to tell true stories regardless of the state power that might be against you. I think that's the role of journalists across the board, to try and speak truth to power and show things as they are. Because I think it's also important to remember that none of what Dr. Magubane photographed was staged. It was the reality. He merely depicted exactly what was happening.
Right, let's look at a reflection of Peter Magubane's work on students of photography in South Africa, especially for the students of or at the Market Workshop, Photo Workshop. How would you say that he used his photography as a medium to educate and teach others?
I think What was important to him was that photographs can be a voice. They can be used as a voice for those who are not necessarily granted the freedom to speak as freely. When Dr. Magubane interacted with us as staff as well as with students, that was the important thing for him. It was, how do you use the camera? How do you use photography as a means of telling the stories that are true, that are real, that are part of your reality, without in any way trying to cover anything up, but trying to see how you get to the truth of the matter. I think, and that is working within the mode of both photojournalism as well as social documentary. But just having that, also that interest in people, having a curiosity about human life. I think those are the things that that drove Dr. Magubane, and those are the values he tried to impart onto students at our institution.
And now speaking about his legacy, I mean, looking at all the work that Dr. Magubane had putting into photography, especially in the anti-apartheid era, how does this inspire and influence younger photographers and activists today?
Interestingly, the last project that we worked on with Dr. Mugubane was from around, I'd say 2021. We have, as the Market Photo Workshop, we put together a publication called the Black Photo Libraries that looks at the experiences of Black photographers during apartheid. And Dr. Mugubane wrote the foreword on that publication. And an interesting thing that what was an interesting message for me in that foreword was about how it's important for the younger photographers to learn from the older photographers, that they take on the lessons that the older photographers walked away with, but also at the same time to get on and do more than what essentially take the baton on from the older generation and reflect the times that we are in.
All right. I want to say thank you, Khona Dlamini, Programs Manager, Market Photo Workshop. Thank you so much for joining us to discuss the life and legacy of Dr. Peter Magubane. And there's no doubt that he would definitely be remembered for his heroic work, especially in the area of photography for the anti-apartheid region or area. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.